night and welcome to the Galen Hour. We're talking about economic transformation tonight. We're going to be looking at traditional and new income earning sectors. We have two of our key CEOs in studios with us tonight, and I want to welcome them. So we have CEO Osman Martinez, Dr. Martinez, CEO in the Ministry of Economic Development, here with us in studios tonight. Welcome, CEO Martinez.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you for being here. We also have Mrs. Nicole Solano, CEO in the Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations. Mrs. Solano, welcome.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
So
thanks for having us.
This should be a really interesting night. Gabby. Welcome, Gabby. Thank you for coming through all this rainy weather to Belize City. I was kind of worried and saying, maybe you want to stay in Belmopan, but it's good. So this is the first time we have everybody in studios, both our guests and both hosts. So welcome.
Thank you.
But I think this is appropriate because what we're talking about tonight is the state of our economy, looking at how our sectors are doing, looking what are new and emerging income earners, but hearing about really what's happening in our country. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get right into the questions. Stay with us.
With our unique student-focused services, Galen University prides itself in doing everything possible to facilitate the success of Galen Eagles. The flexible payment plans, student loan options, and Eagle scholarships make Galen affordable, accessible, and attractive. Treat yourself to the gift of a Galen education. Apply today and secure your spot. Come soar with the Galen Eagles. Visit our website at www.galen.edu.bz or give us a call at 615-3129 or 614-6415.
Galen University's Institute of Hospitality and Tourism is excited to announce that registration is now open for a ServSafe certification course. This highly respected program sets the industry standard in food safety. Upon completion, you'll receive an official certificate from Galen University. Join us on November 9th and 10th, 2023 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Galen University's Central Farm campus. For more information, contact 608-3066. Secure your spot today.
Welcome back to the Galen Hour. We have in studios again CEO Martinez and CEO Solano. So we're going to be talking about our economy, and we want to start with CEO Martinez. CEO, but thank you, before I ask you a question, thank you for partnering with Galen University, because what we're doing here tonight is in partnership with the Ministry of Economic Development. And I think it's an absolutely important and very valuable initiative. So, and tonight we get to hear from you about the state of our economy. If we can start there.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Gabby. And those who are listening, pleasant good night. It's always a pleasure to spend some time with our Galen Eagles. There is a saying that once an eagle, always an eagle.
Always an eagle.
And that's me,
Yes.
So, and it's always a pleasure as well to be contributing and working in collaboration with academia. In this case, it's Galen University. And it's my hope that in the future we can also have involvement from the University of Belize, UWI. Why? Because education is, I have always said that education should never be part of sustainable development. Education is sustainable development. And I do believe strongly that any country that has as a fundamental pillar and sits on the main principles of educating its population, it will be a success. Nelson Mandela once said that politicians don't like an educated nation, because an educated nation is more dangerous than an atomic bomb. And so therefore, when politicians embrace education and they look forward to honestly look to educate a nation, is wonderful. So congratulations to Galen. This is great. When we look at our economy coming from practically a depression, an economic depression, not a recession, but an economic depression, because once your indicators, especially GDP, is below 10% or a decrease above 10%, then the any nation's economic state falls within an economic depression. And in 2020, Belize and the world practically collapsed. Economies collapsed due to COVID-19. And at that time, we could have seen how fragile our economy was, simply because it was dependent on tourism. Some of the advantages, when you look at the tourism sector, it has pros and cons. And one of the cons that it has is that the tourism sector is not dependent on the health of our internal economic aspect. It depends on external economic health, but at the same time on external economic shocks. In this case, COVID-19 forced us to close our borders. And so the economic sector have direct and indirect impacts. But there are other sectors now that have come into play. And when we look, for example, at the BPOs, and it's very interesting because for the history and the life of Belize, the government is the main generator of jobs. Government generates around 16,000 jobs. And I think there has been other private sector businesses that maybe generate 2,000 jobs and 3,000 jobs. But for the first time, the BPO sectors has generated 13,000 jobs. So our forecast is that maybe in 2 to 3 years from now, the BPO sectors will be the number one generators of jobs in Belize, and government will fall into second place, which is good. I mean, any nation that depends on government so strong practically has a weak economic backbone. And so it has been exposed in Belize over and over and over. But when you look, for example, at how the correlation work in economics, is that once people are working, once people are well off, then as a result of that, you should start to see a reduction of poverty, and then a reduction in crime. So normally when you look at countries, for example, New Zealand, Switzerland, who has a high income per capita, the crimes committed for every 100,000 persons, because that's how you measure intended homicides in economics, is less than 1 to 100,000. And normally in the Caribbean there is about 39 intended homicides to 100,000. So to see a nation having little or low crime is very good. Why? Because again, it lends itself to investment opportunities, so investment into the tourism sector. And just to that, during the CEO caucus, CEO Solano and I, we were talking about the importance of continue to champion citizen security within Belize and in areas where we have our tourism activities, simply because that will give confidence to our tourists. I mean, any one of us, whenever we travel, the first question we ask is it safe to walk? So safety should be number one priority at all times. And when you look at our economy in 2020, when it actually declined by almost 17 points, and then in 2022 there was an increase or growth on our economy by 15.8%, and then in 2022 there is a growth of 12.4%, and the average growth for this year is a little bit over 6%, and the forecast is that it will grow around 6 to 8%, and unemployment that went from 30% to 2.8%. One of the things that you have seen is that practically on the last month, in the month of October, there was low crime rates. And that again is citizen security, and that is by having everyone working. And I will end by saying, in addition to the BPOs, there is also the construction sector. And it's in line a lot with what the tourism sector is doing in terms of bringing more investors, but at the same time, they will have to, they have their own strategy, their own recovery plan, which have been excellent.
Thank you, CEO Martinez. Yes, you rightly indicated that tourism is one of the important sectors, and we know what our tourism industry went through. Well, the global tourism industry, what the world went through during the pandemic. Now we're post-pandemic, and as you said earlier, CEO Solano, we've seen a rebound. Could you tell us a little bit about our tourism sector?
Yes, thank you very much as well. It's good to be here, and good night. Thanks to Galen, and good night to all the viewers. As CEO mentioned just now, tourism is linked to all of those sectors that he mentioned, and there's always an impact. There's some linkage or some impact. If you talk about agriculture, tourism impacts that. Construction, there's always a link, and that is part of the reason why we have to work so closely with our colleagues in all of the different ministries. There's a relationship to tourism, inevitably. Safety and security, one of the biggest ones indeed, as he had mentioned. Looking at where we are right now compared to pre-pandemic, we were pleased with the rebound that we've seen. We're not 100% back to pre-pandemic levels yet, and so when we look at where we are today, we look at 2019 numbers, right? 2019 is the year that we do our comparisons to. So year to date, if you look at January to September, October numbers aren't in yet. October just finished. If you compare January to September in 2019 and January to September 2023, we're about 92% in our overnight sector. So that means that travelers that come in and stay overnight, we're almost at the same number of arrivals as we were in 2019. And we expect that come the end of the year, we should be close, if not reach those numbers. As a matter of fact, September was the month that we saw back to 100% of 2019. So those indicators are good. In cruise, we're a little bit behind. If you look at the same number of months, January to September, we're about 76%. We do not believe that we will reach 100% by the end of this year, but for both overnight and cruise, October, November, usually it's around Thanksgiving going into the Christmas season, and New Year's is when that's when we consider a high season. So we do expect things to pick up again, and as we go into the high season, or the busier months of the year, we expect to see those numbers go up. So yes, we do realize that in the tourism industry, these kinds of external factors, as CEO Martinez rightfully mentioned, impact on the tourism industry. Everything, the economic situation in our major markets, war, any of these international conditions in our markets affect whether or not people are going to travel. What we've found is that the international traveler in the United States, which is our major market, North America is our major market, which includes the US and Canada, these persons who are traveling internationally tend to not be affected as much by recession. So that is positive for positive news for the travel industry for Belize. Also, if we were to look at why people are traveling and why Belize has become such a, I call it a hot destination for travelers, I think the pandemic did have an effect on the type of travel that people are looking for. Belize, just by its very nature, is the type of place that people want to come to escape their normal routine and the way that they live. Our focus in tourism is sustainable tourism, which means that we are connected with people and planet. So the authentic, immersive experiences that people can have when they come to Belize are the types of experiences that they're looking for, and Belize is perfect for that.
And I think it's really important. Thank you to both the CEOs for setting up the context of where we are and how we got there in the first place as well. But I think the reason that we're having this episode and especially this series is because the MTDS focuses on strategic objectives, and this one is talking about economic transformation. Where we are, but also where we're going, and what are the next steps. So I guess I just want to ask from both of your ministries, MED, I come from MED, but the Ministry of Tourism as well, what are some of the policies or the programs or projects under your ministries right now that's driving that economic transformation, that is taking Belize to that next level or that next step in terms of our economy? So I guess we can start with you, CEO Solano.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. First of all, our Minister of Tourism is very driven and challenges us every day to make sure that we are pushing forward. We can't just accept things as they are or continue doing things as they are. We have to elevate the industry and we have to move forward. If I could just give you a brief overview, the Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations is the ministry of government responsible for governance, planning and policy development. We have two statutory boards, the Belize Tourism Board and the Board of Management Agency. So our main two main technical units within the ministry would be tourism and diaspora relations. I know that the conversation is mainly about tourism tonight, but I just want to say that diaspora relations is also an important part and an important, the Belizeans living abroad contribute significantly to the economy as well by way of remittances, and not only remittances, and we're talking about 150 million a year, Belize dollars. They also provide on an ongoing basis, donations, and they provide supplies, and they give laptops and medical supplies and a number of things over the year. We've seen an influx of about 3 million in donations alone already. So I don't want us to discount that, and Belizeans living abroad come home as tourists. So they're coming home. A lot of Belizeans are excited about enjoying Belize as a destination, and even though they come to see family and friends, they want to go to San Pedro and Kikaka and Placencia and Punta Gorda and Cayo and Hopkins, all of the areas within the country to enjoy what it is that they're seeing in the international market. So that is a very important aspect. From tourism and what we're doing, the Belize Tourism Board is the agency responsible for the execution of all of these plans that we've put in place and all of the regulatory framework that the ministry is responsible to. We work together as a team, so you will see like the ministry and the BTB working very closely together moving forward. We are focusing on implementing a number of things. We're updating our National Sustainable Tourism Master Plan right now, and there's a significant amount of focus on training and development. We understand and recognize the need to build capacity, so that's one of the things that we're doing. Marketing has always been one of the major mandates of the Belize Tourism Board, and that continues to be the case. But infrastructure development is where we're looking at right now. We know that we need to improve the tourism infrastructure throughout the country in the main destinations. So investment in that area in order to make sure that we can continue to not only receive additional tourists, but make sure that when they come, they have the type of experience that they expect, so that they can return, and also spread the word that this is a place that is value for money. We're looking for high value, low impact travelers, and we have to be able to provide to them. Safety and security, as CEO mentioned, very high on the list. Aviation development, we continue to work with our partners in the Ministry of Civil Aviation as well, and other partners to ensure that we can attract new airlift and new routes into Belize. Very important part of what we do. So those are the main areas of focus really at this time.
And then I guess CEO Martinez as well, we have, a really good idea of what's happening in the tourism sector. And as, Ms. D mentioned, that's only one part of the productive sector and only one part of the economic ecosystem of Belize right now. So I guess CEO Martinez can also speak about the larger economy and what kind of policies and programs are we doing to drive that transformation in that area.
Yes, we are privileged that at the Ministry of Economic Development we look at all the macro indicators. Tourism is only one of the indicators that we look at, and then we have to analyze the data, work very closely with the SIB, which is the Statistical Institute of Belize, which is under the Ministry of Economic Development, and based on the data that we receive, then it helps us to look at the different indicators that we should work and policies that need to be produced so that we can continue to enable a friendly environment for economic transformation. When you look at economic transformation, it's a broad word. Why? Because we have different sectors. We have the tourism sector. We also have the private sector that when you look at the private sector is very interesting, because it's connected also to tourism, but also to real estate, to BPOs, agro-productive sector. When you look at it, for example, between 2010 and 2020, the ease of doing business in Belize, actually became more difficult. So I'll just give you an example. In 2010, the ease of doing business in Belize, and this is data according to the World Bank, was 96 out of 172 countries. So Belize ranked 96. By 2020, Belize rank was 137 out of 172 countries. So our situation of enabling a friendly environment for investors became a little bit more difficult, and I should say very difficult. So unfortunately, the World Bank stopped using that indicator to continue to measure the ease of doing business throughout the whole world, and we do hope that a new instrument will be produced so that we can look at where we are, because it's important to monitor and to be realistic where we are. The second part is, so we look at investment, but what is creating and what is the main problem to continue to see economic transformation? And one of the indicators that we have a huge challenge of in Belize is that we have a low human capital index. Jamaica and Belize are the two countries in the Caribbean with the lowest human capital index, and of course Haiti. So our human capital index is around 0.71, while North America, in this case Canada, the United States, the Asian countries, Europe, is above 0.9. And the issue that we have there then is that people, or our population, is not as productive as how it should be, but more important is that their income is not as high as if they would have had a higher human capital investment. So for example, if someone only has a primary school certificate versus someone who has a bachelor's degree, the income, there is a huge gap on it. And with that gap now comes the high inequality that the country has. Why? Because, and I always use this as an example, when my daughter graduated from primary school, there were a total of about 22,000 students across the country that graduated at primary school. But when she graduated from high school, the total countrywide was just a little bit over 7,000. So what happened to the other 12,000 students? And then I'm sure that I'm looking forward, to when she graduates from sixth form, how many will be graduating with her. So I recall a time that I was asked that there was about 1,000 students that graduated from the University of Belize. And the question was, how will we generate jobs for them? And my response was like, where are the ones who were deprived of graduating with the 1,000 students? That is of a bigger concern, because the 1,000 that graduated now is employed, and they have a good income. So part of economic transformation, it has to start with me, with I, and we have to understand that an economy can grow, but if you don't have economic development, then there is no economic transformation. Because you can have economic growth without economic development, but you can have economic development. Once you have economic development, you will surely have economic growth. So what is the main issue here? The main issue is that when you look at an economy, all of us are an economy here, and we are part of the economy, and we contribute whether it is positively or negatively. So if we produce negatively, we will be sent to the central prison, and we create job to the administration there. We create job for the judges, police, and all the guards. So we do have a negative impact because now we are becoming a burden to the state and a burden to those who are contributing. So economic transformation have to start with people. If we can understand that part, and everyone would open their an appetite to want to learn and want to be progressive, then that's the first step. So, for example, I recall on a conversation that we had with the president of Korea, and he said, Belize is so blessed. Belize have beautiful people, beautiful culture, and you have a wealth of natural resource. He says, our only resource that we had was a human resource, and we have capitalized on it. Countries that have people that have a good appetite to learn, an appetite to be productive, and they're passionate about trying to improve. I first, myself, each one of us, are the countries that have been able to actually come out from developing nation to developed nation. So when you look at South Korea and Japan, 60 years ago, both nations were destroyed. Their income per capita was $80 per year. But no, they are in the top 10 strongest economy in the world, with one of the highest income per capita in the world, the leading technological, when you look at those countries, they are the ones who lead and dictate the pace of technology. So that's the first foundation. Then the second is, how can you generate a friendly environment for everyone to have access to education? Then you move on now to investments, because there must be an incentive. No one moves without incentives. So when you look at a basketball player or any athlete, their investment is that whenever they score a goal or do a beautiful 2-pointers or 3-pointers, the crowd claps for them. So that's an incentive. Everybody wants to win, and that's why you have a trophy when you win, if you win a competition, because there is an incentive. So, but what should be the incentive is that you should have a job. So historically, one of the main issues that we had is that you would say, oh, I have a bachelor's degree, but I cannot get a job. So there was no incentive of why I should continue to study. So now you start to mix what the government's responsibility are and what the individual responsibility are. Both have to be responsible. Government should enable a friendly environment. Individuals should have a sense of having a good appetite to learn. But when you look at economic transformation, it starts with people, enabling environment, investment, and then to continue to diversify on your sector. And not the last thing, but an important part of it is how can you generate more transactions within our ecosystem before our currency exits our ecosystem. So these are the things that we have to focus on to continue to grow and to transform our economy.
A lot to absorb. Yes, but it's a big deal. Looking at, I'm so glad that you, and we talked about this a little earlier before we started, that you focus on all aspects of what contributes to the economy and the transformation of the economy. Because sometimes when we think about that, we really think it's a job one of the government, then we also think very limited and not realizing that as individuals, as you just said, we play a key role. When CEO Mejia was here last week, she talked about the same disparities that you mentioned with education, how many graduate from primary school, when you hit secondary school, and then...
Yeah, and the labor market as well, how sometimes they don't even correlate with each other.
Absolutely. So
And you know what is sad? You're not asking, but I will tell you. What happened is that when government do spend, because remember, when you're in primary school, it's an investment. And investments that the working class is paying for. So when this child does not continue his education, it's like building a house where you build your foundation, but you didn't finish it. So there is a dead investment that comes from taxpayers.
Yep. Absolutely. It is so important for us to be aware of our individual roles, in the economy. You mentioned how much resources we have. Korea, you said, had its people. We have natural resources. And we haven't mentioned tonight, but how do we account for the value of our resources and how it contributes to our economy? Maybe that would be a whole nother lengthy conversation. So can we take a quick break? And when we come back, we start there because it impacts both ministries, well, the economic development, but also the tourism industry. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with the Galen Hour.
Race is on fire. These guys have some top speed of over 29 miles an hour as they blaze. Oscar Quiros have attacked. Oscar looks want to go home. Oscar Quiros, the 2023 cross country champion. Look at the field.
Hi everyone, my name is Oscar Quiros. I graduate of Galen University with a bachelor's degree in environmental science. I'm currently pursuing my professional career in cycling with the Miami Blazers. I can safely say that the critical skills as well as the time management skills that I've obtained from Galen University has helped me in many ways that I could have imagined. And I can honestly say that I've applied these skills to both my cycling career and my everyday life as a professional.
I want to serve as a great influence to the youths of today as to why an education is important. Let's get back into the classroom. Let's prove them wrong. Opportunities are limitless.
Become a member of the Galen Eagle Alumni Association. Reconnect with your fellow classmates, rediscover the Galen Eagle spirit, and reawaken your inner eagle. Come home. Come celebrate 20 years of excellence with Galen University. For more information, contact us at 615-3129 or 614-6415.
Welcome back to the Galen Hour. We're talking with CEO in the Ministry of Economic Development, CEO Martinez. We also have with us CEO Solano in the Ministry of Tourism and Diaspora Relations. Welcome back. Welcome back to our viewing audience. We left off just before the break talking about how our natural resources contribute to our economy.
And that's a huge discussion all the time. How are we going to balancing growing the economy, but also taking care of what we already have and our natural resources and sustaining that? So I think that's a question for our guests, not for us to
our
answer.
guests. So tell us what we're doing, how we're doing what we're doing, and how it really impacts and fits into your ministry, CEO Solano.
Well, our approach to sustainable tourism is based on the natural and cultural assets of this country, which are resources that we have to protect not only for us today but for generations to come. So that's what sustainability means, being able to utilize these natural and cultural resources over time. So we have to protect and conserve. That's a big part of how we approach tourism development. And there's always a question about how to develop, because regardless of how many travelers you have coming in, whether it's Belizeans or international travelers, there will be an impact on the environment when you have people on the reef, people on the archaeological sites, people hiking through protected areas and reserves. There's an impact. So the most important thing for us to do is to be able to minimize that impact, which is why I'd mentioned earlier the need for high value, low impact travel. The opposite to that would be mass tourism, which is something that we don't want. We want sustainable tourism going forward. So in the tourism industry, we try to look for and encourage business development around those aspects of tourism. The majority of our tourism sector is made up of micro, small, and medium enterprises. Even our hotels, majority of our hotels are small hotels. 9,000 rooms, 900 hotels, 10 hotel rooms per hotel that's the average number, right? So you're talking about an entire industry that's focused on small properties and small businesses. And that is a good thing. It brings with it some challenges. There's a lot of development. I had mentioned training earlier, training and the capacity building that's needed so that we can recognize the business opportunities out there. We can't just have the natural resources and then expect that they'll come. We have to create the infrastructure around it. If you're going to an archaeological site, people will need bathroom facilities. They'll need you need parking lot. You need gift shops. You need restaurants. You can't go all the way to Caracol and then you have nothing to eat when you get there, nothing to drink, right? So things like interpretation centers in museums, and when we say museum, we talk about, it doesn't have to be the types of museums you see out there. We can create our own, but there are certain standards that we need and certain things that we look out for, and all of these create business opportunities, which leads into, of course, additional economic development for the country. So I would say that there's a lot of opportunity. We do have a lot of businesses that have, organically grown in order to support the demand of tourism, but we recognize the need of doing additional planning, supporting the private sector and these small businesses so that they can better capitalize on the opportunities that exist out there.
Good. Yeah, we've actually seen, and I like to throw in this little piece whenever I can, how entrepreneurship flourished as a result of the pandemic. The pandemic was horrible, but there were lots of good things that came out of it, and entrepreneurship just blossomed. And I'm just saying that because you mentioned that we have lots, the majority of our properties are small properties. I'm not sure if any of them came out of the pandemic. I would doubt it, because that kind of crushed our tourism sector, but all of the other supporting businesses, a lot of them may have come out. I know a lot of jewelry making, people just, their creativity just blossomed. And so CEO Martinez, it has contributed to our economy and to growth within our economy, and maybe less people are dependent on the government now for jobs, but we do need the training that you spoke about a little earlier. But from your perspective, CEO, our natural resources, how does it fit in?
Belize is a wealthy country when you look at natural resource. We have the largest living barrier reef in the world. We have, out of 4 atolls that we have in the Western Hemisphere, Belize has 3. We have a beautiful blue hole. We are one of the few countries, or maybe the only country, that in the Caribbean region that can actually speaks about this. We have 400 islands with some beautiful sea, and we have some of the most friendliest shark in the world where you can swim with them. And if you're afraid of sharks, you can swim with the turtles in the southern part of the country, and then we have our mountains, and our Maya temples. But more important, Belize is a carbon sink for the world, and it's one of the few countries in the world that is a carbon sink, of which our hope is that as part of economic development as well and sustainable development, that we will be able, and we are already negotiating carbon credits, that it will be actually moving businesses from a traditional economic system to a modern economic system. So while during economic transformation, we have done a lot for the private sector. We have to do NGOs, but also for the public sector. Why? Because within the public sector, you have to be to have a government that will be able to produce and to be productive and to help its people. We need to manage our fiscal, be responsible in the management of our fiscal budget, and to create fiscal space. And one of the things that we have done well is, for example, to negotiate some of the debts that we had as a nation. And when you look, for example, the blue bond transaction, have received 3 international awards. It was considered as a unique transaction worldwide, the first of its kind. I know it has been replicated in Barbados and Ecuador. In Barbados, its replication was just a small percent of Belize's transaction. But when you look at Ecuador's one was much bigger, but their economy is much bigger. But when it comes to debt to GDP, Belize continues to lead in the world now of having a debt swap using our natural resources, because if we didn't have the natural resources, we wouldn't have been able to do that debt swap. So when you get to look at the debt to GDP, it had a direct impact of 12% of our GDP that it was wiped off right away, and then it had an indirect impact of 25% of to our debt to GDP. The IMF is still asking for those models, economic models and homegrown economic plans that we created internally here so that it can be replicated in other nations with similar characteristics as Belize, or economic characteristics as Belize. And then when you look now at debt to GDP, for example, it was at 133%, but the blue bond transaction, because of the natural resources, gave us a refreshment, and it was like new energy within Belize's ecosystem, meaning the people felt that, like, okay, we trust you now. That was a game changer, and that started to attract the attention of Belize now, but because of the natural resources. And now we have the carbon credits, which we are negotiating. We are huge advocates of it. We are huge advocates of climate finance, climate justice. I think we are one of the leading countries in the world that we use every platform to speak about it. And there is a lot of things that people don't know, and we have seen it, but because it's part of our culture, we are not thinking about it in that aspect. But when you look, for example, in the news, we have heard about climate change refugees, but we have our own climate change refugees here. When you look at Monkey River, people had to leave their good homes, so they have become climate change refugees. When you look at the appetite that climate change come with, they have a vicious, it has a mega appetite coming to swallow whatever it could swallow, and our islands continue to be in jeopardy. Our coral reefs right now, we have an issue with the bleaching of our coral reefs. And so our natural resource, we are doing our part. We believe in sustainability. We believe in protecting our natural resources, but at the same time, now we need to start to think not only about mitigation aspect, but adaptation. So why? Because climate change is real, hurricanes are real, drought is real, flood is real, and we have to move into these different aspects of it. And the sad part is, while Belize have done so much and have gained so much from our natural resources, we also we have losses of about 7% of our GDP because of the impacts of climate change to Belize. And when you look at Belize climate risk globally, Belize is actually, it ranks 5 out of 162 countries in the world. So when we talk about vulnerability, Belize is a high risk country to climate change. And so it's just important to note that while our natural resources are there, it is also our responsibility to get it. But then I will leave you with one important thought and question. The thing is, and the question that have always come up is like, how is the natural resources and the beauties that we have feeding the poor people of Belize? How many poor people, or how many people that fall within the population that is poor, have ever visited the barrier reef and swim and enjoyed, or swim with our beautiful sharks? And these are the things that we need to start to capitalize on, where we can do the trade of carbon credits, so that these monies can be invested in health, education, citizen security, infrastructure development, housing programs, feeding programs, and where you can transform people's lives. So that is part of our economic transformation as well. And that's one of the plans that we have within the MTDS.
I don't think there's any, I think they said it right. I don't think there's any economy to even think about transforming without sustainability or without thinking where Belize stands in regards to our natural resources or where we are right now. I think a lot of it's based on actually those things, and so they're both right with that.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I was going to.
More and more people in the world recognize that. And so I think CEO was right in saying that as local travelers as well, we need to be able to enjoy our country and what it has to offer, move from where we are in the cities into the areas that are more nature based, and that connection with nature is what we need as Belizeans and what our visitors need in order to remind us about that connection and just how precious it is to our very existence, and the value that it places on that we rely on these natural resources for so many things.
And when I think of economic transformation, I don't know about you, I don't only think of sustainability, but I also think of innovation. I always think of what's next or what can be next, because I know that in economics there's this whole color economies happening now, orange economy, blue economy, green economy, and you both talked about those as well. So I don't know, I'm interested in thinking about, are we going towards those new sectors, those new areas, those new innovative ways of transforming our economy? Because I know for a long time we've been relying on these traditional methods, which is fine and it's worked great for us, but I'm also curious as to, well, what's next for us? I mean, Belize has kind of set the tone in the world for a lot of things, and so with the blue bond especially, so I'm interested to know in the ministries, what's going to be the next big thing, or what are we going to tap into next?
Well, I could comment on the orange economy just a little bit, because obviously the cultural aspect of Belize is very important from a tourism standpoint. So how do we take these cultural attributes of Belize? And when I talk about culture, you're talking about music, art, all of the food and the culinary aspect that is so unique to Belize. And how do we take the opportunities around that and be able to package it in a way that we can actually create business opportunities around that. So the orange economy, very important. That is something that is a part of our strategic direction. We know that we want to support that, and a lot of the activities that we do are related to how we can help and work together with the ministry responsible for culture, niche, the Institute of Archaeology, all of those, in order to create business opportunities through tourism, because that's what people are coming here for. They're coming here, they're willing to, to pay for access to these precious resources that we have, and our cultural resources and our cultural assets are as important as our natural assets. So how do we, that question of how we take advantage of creating business opportunities around that is going to be the big question going forward.
Yeah, but it's important to note that, and it's interesting now that I will finish with challenges, through doing research and being in academia, I learned to identify problems. Why? Because that's the only way you will solve them. But some of our biggest challenges that we have is that from the beginning and the onset of this administration, we had to face so many challenges. When we started, it was overwhelming, because it was like there was no way out, and eventually, one by one, started to each indicator, I should say, started to give good fruits and yield that positive energy, that gave us the fuel to keep moving forward. But it was overwhelming, to start off with COVID-19 and to be able to focus on two things at that time, which was one, to save people's lives, and two was to save the economy. Our economy was the borderline of collapsing. I mean, it could have easily, our economy have, this is, not a lot of times we talk about it, but our currency could have been devaluated. We were days away from experiencing devaluation. If things are bad right now in terms of inflation, it would have been much, much worse. I remember some of the banks, the multilaterals, closing the valves, whereby because there was a default on payments to the blue bond, they closed the valves. They put a hold on ongoing projects and financing. And the IMF, they were waiting and see what would happen. And so it was so hard. But then you start to look now, and we look at other challenges. So the other challenges we have now, because we have high inflation, the U.S. Federal Reserve have used an instrument which is to increase the interest rate on the cost of finance. So in 2019 and before 2019, the cost of finance, for example, was less than 1%, or it could have fluctuated from less than 1% to about 1.5%, because at that time they were using the LIBOR system to measure the interest rate of finance. And now it's almost at 6%. So while the federal, the U.S. Federal Reserve have increased the cost of finance, it's actually affecting countries like Belize. And that's where we need to become and be more innovative. And let me tell you where I'm going with this one here. So we had to look at other opportunities. So for example, for the first time in history, Belize have become eligible to the Korean Economic Development Corporation Fund. Practically, and I must say that our negotiations were successful when you look at that a country actually changed the rules and the criteria for a country like Belize to qualify, because Belize would have never been eligible if the present criteria that Korea had. Now, what is the interest rate for that? It's 0.1%. Okay, and now we were in Marrakesh at the World Bank annual meetings, and our main objective was to meet with the G7 countries to lobby for an application that we submitted to the World Bank, which is the IDA. IDA means the International Development Association. IDA's program that falls within the World Bank. So there's a lot of technicalities. So for example, the IDA programs is there to assist small island development states. So under the United Nations, Belize is considered a small island development state. But under the World Bank, Belize is not considered a small island development state. So we did put an argument, and the application was submitted in March of 2022. We did put an argument, and we have been back and forth until we managed to convince the World Bank's management at the vice president level. And so they came to Belize and look at it as a good opportunity. And now, anything can happen, but I'm confident and I have good feelings that, and I'm being cautious in the way I'm saying it. I'm not here to celebrate yet, but from the feedbacks that we got is that the IDA's board deputy directors of IDA will meet in December, and it seems like Belize will become eligible to IDAs. Now, what does that mean to Belize? No, that we will continue to get access to finance that is practically grants and highly concessional, maybe less than 0.5% interest rate. And why I'm saying this is because the government would want to do more. We would want to do more in terms of economic transformation. And one of our main things is to close the gap. And CEO did speak about there is a gap that needs to be closed in the tourism sector. So for example, we need to continue infrastructure development in the tourism sector, service, to increase, to upskill and reskill the labor force that we have within the tourism sector and all the other sectors, the agro-productive sector,
We have issues with utilities, we have issues with solid waste management,
Exactly.
Water waste management and all of that. So absolutely all of those things impact on the industry. So very good.
And you would look, for example, at BWS, wanted to do some expansions in North Hamburgues Key. When you look at San Pedro, it's only about less than 50% of the island practically is developed. We still have about 40 to 50% of area there that can be developed. And when you look at San Pedro, it's almost the size of Barbados, meaning that we can have a whole country if it will be fully functional. But for that, you need sewer system, you need water, you need energy, you need road infrastructure, you need everything in place, And so, but because of the high cost of finance for the government, it has been really difficult to do as much things, even though I feel comfortable that we're doing a lot, but I'm not satisfied that we're doing enough.
That's right. You said it.
Yeah, this has been really interesting. We have 5 minutes. This has been such valuable information, though, and I mean, we've just touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can talk about with respect to our economy and economic transformation, and we know how important tourism is. So, unless you have any other burning question, I'd like to give our guests an opportunity to give their last remarks, your last words, your parting shots.
Well, I definitely do appreciate the opportunity to talk about the tourism industry, and I think COVID was really the opportunity for us as a country to see how important tourism was and for everybody to understand the impact of tourism on the economy. We're talking about approximately 50%. I round it up, CEO, I know you want to correct me, but approximately 50% of GDP, right? And that's because we're counting direct, because there's direct, indirect, induced. When you have people employed, they can go ahead and, have that buying power, and that also contributes to the economy. The industry, we estimate, well, according to Social Security Board, about 20,000 people employed. We know it's more than that. About half of that we believe in the hotel sector. We have about 2,500 tour guides, about a little bit over 250 tour operators, a lot of people working in the industry. We know that there's a lot of opportunity for growth. We know that the hotel sector is poised for growth. There's a lot of opportunity in terms of the high-end market, private aviation, luxury, yachts. There's a lot of development out there. So we're very excited. We have a very strong team, a very dedicated and passionate team, and we continue to work day in and day out to grow tourism and develop the industry sustainably. So thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit.
We're really happy you could join us. I mean, and kudos to your minister and your ministry. We're seeing lots of innovation in how you're marketing our country. So keep up the good work. CEO Martinez.
Thank you. At the Ministry of Economic Development, we are privileged that we have a task to implement the medium-term development strategy, to monitor the implementation, but also to find the resources. When you look at the medium-term development strategy, for us to effectively and efficiently implement the strategy, it would cost us about $1.7 billion, which is a lot of money. We are using our limited resources. We're doing our best to mobilize funds, especially grants, especially coming from climate finance, so that we can continue to work in terms of our NDCs, which is our national determined contributions. Also align everything to our sustainable development goals, which is coming to practically our last lap to 2030. But more important for us is to create policies that will help with the fundamental principles of having humans living with dignity in Belize. So for example, how can we reduce poverty? How can we move on now into reducing inequality? Belize is in the top 5 countries in the world with the highest inequality. So our gap distribution of wealth we have a huge gap that we need to close. And then how can we continue to sustain 2 things? Unemployment, that we will be able to sustain the jobs that we have and create new jobs. And 2, how can Belize continue to sustain the economic growth that we have? Okay, so within the economic development, we will continue to focus, and our priority as the medium-term development strategy has stated, the first point is to reduce poverty. And yesterday there was a press release that went out where we can see now that health persons going now to access health, there will not be no fees that will be charged to them.
Except for
the Carl Huchner, because they are more of a quasi-government system rather than a government system. So that is a big help, you know, and a nation needs two fundamental pillars to move forward. You know, one is education, and two is health. Educated country can actually be innovative, creative, and productive. And a healthy country is an asset to any nation. And we need to capitalize in both things. Once we have both components, everything else would fall in place very easy. So at the Ministry of Economic Development, we continue to put policies first and foremost that are data-driven, and secondly, that are easy to implement. So our policies are not there just to make it fancy words. No, remove the fancy words. How can it be practical and implemented? Less discussion and more action. That it is how it is being done. And simply, I'll give you an example. Last year, around this time, we looked at in Dangriga, for example, we had, when you look at the men sectors, they had the highest unemployment rate. It was in Dangriga. And so the government, in a holistic approach, say, you know what, our best approach right now is to try to mobilize and put a BPO in Dangriga. That BPO has created about 250 jobs, and it has an impact because, remember, everything has a domino effect, whether it's positive or negative. And the BPO in Dangriga now is having a positive effect. So you have taxi drivers, you have people that sells food, others that will just depend on their families, for example, to send them to school, to improve their lives, but also consumption, you know, consumption's increase. But this year, when I look at the preliminary data, and I look at the LSF, which is the labor survey, LFS, labor force survey, there is a decrease now on unemployment. And so we want to continue to make our policies practical, and more important, that it will have an impact on the individuals. It doesn't make sense if we do A, B, and C, and it doesn't have an impact on the Belizean people. And that's our main aim.
Wonderful.
I don't have anything to say
Because my CEO said it all.
Yep. Wonderful. I enjoyed this discussion. I hope our viewing audience enjoyed it and took away all the valuable information you shared. So we've come to the end of tonight's Galen Hour. Remember, no Christmas before 19th. We're in November. No jingle bells until we've celebrated with our... You said Dangriga as your part of your parting shot, and I had to throw in that.
Culture as well.
And culture, yes.
Big for us in Belize. So we definitely look forward to celebrating this entire month.
Yes. It has been an absolute pleasure to have CEO Martinez and CEO Solano on with us tonight. Thank you, Gabby, for coming all the way to Belize City. It's always good to have our co-host in studio. We come to the end of the Galen Hour, but we'll be back here same time, same place, next week, Wednesday. Please join us. The Galen Hour is a production of Galen University. It focuses on academic excellence, sustainable development, and lifelong learning. See you next week. Thank you for joining us, and good night.